Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming on weekend to listen to something not so interesting. Yeah. So let me quickly give my introduction. So I'm a cloud solution architect, as the designation and name suggests, right? I do a lot of cloud application designing and solutioning, which means like how much money it will take to move to cloud, right? That's part of the designing and solutioning. And then impress the stakeholder who pays those money to move those workload into cloud or build something new into the cloud. Either it's a migration or a new workload, right? And as part of that exercise, what we have been talking since we started working with customer on the public cloud, not in the private cloud, but the public cloud, is that how much money we're going to save when we move from on-premises to cloud. But then it started growing in the cloud, the estate which you maintain in the cloud. So the eventual question arises, right? How much can you save with an existing workload which is already in the cloud, right? That's called cloud saving. That's what I want to focus here. So we are not considering like how much extra we are paying on premises versus in the cloud, but what is already there in the cloud which you already have moved, right? And what are the opportunities and common slips we might encounter when we go to the cloud, which still keeps us paying those bills. So as I often say, that cloud is like electricity. So you get an electricity at home, the more appliances you use, the more bill it comes, right? So how you reduce that bill is by switching off certain appliances which you don't need. But certain things you need all the time. Let's say in the night you need the light to be switched on, but when you sleep you switch off the light, right? So that's the common practice. We also practice in office, right? If you're not using the monitor, we switch off the monitor, we switch off the light. Now it's all smart lights. So as you enter the room, the lights are switched on, you get switched off because we need to save the money, right? So that saving is everywhere. And with this macroeconomic condition, right, it's better to save the cloud cost than losing certain headcounts from the company, which can create trouble when you need them in the project time, right? So it's that balance. It is everywhere, you will find that. So it's not like we move to the cloud to save the money and it ends there. It's a constant process, right? So the saving is an exercise. It should be part of your DNA and the daily routine. It's like a stand-up, but not so frequent like daily stand-up, but maybe monthly once or quarterly once, an exercise of your application estate to understand what are the things where we can save. Because we keep changing, which when you say we keep changing, it could be you from an application deployment perspective or the infrastructure which you use versus the cloud infrastructure which you are using. So just to give you an example, you might have created a virtual machine in the cloud a couple of years ago. Now with the new hardware and the new offering, the same size virtual machine is available in the next generation, which is cheaper. That's how the cloud competition happens in the market. If you compare all the major three public cloud, right? You see the virtual machine sizes in the cloud, right? They have generations, which means generation 1, 2, 3, 4. The more higher generation it is, the cheaper it will be, because the hardware is more modern, it's built using certain new technology, and if you continue to use something like generation 1, you probably end up paying more if you switch to the generation 2. And switching to generation 1 to generation 2 or 3 is seamless. That migration doesn't impact you from a redeployment perspective. It's just a decision you need to take when you want to do that. Certain times you need to move between hardware stack, and that's why there is a downtime required. So in a production, you need to find that what is the right downtime. We can switch the hardware and switch the hardware to save the cost. So you maintain the same estate, but you're saving the cost by moving to a more modern way of doing things, right? So those are the things which I wanted to highlight over here and talk to, right? So it is an exercise, as I said, right? But certain basic things doesn't change, which I wanted to highlight. What it doesn't change is the user experience. You don't want to compromise on the user experience by introducing certain low-cost virtual machines or low-cost services, which doesn't give that kind of performance which you expect from your application, right? So it's that user experience. You don't compromise on that, because if you lose that experience, whether it's an internal business user or external user, You basically lose the interest of people using your application. If it's a bad application, nobody likes to use it, right? Now then, RTO and RPO doesn't change. That's the business call, right? So what is my recovery time objective and then data recovery objective? Now these things, right? When things go wrong, how long can I go idle? Or how much data can I expect to lose? It's all the business decision which is coming from the end user business team to you when you build that application, right? That doesn't change. So if you are going to compromise or reduce the cost by resizing certain resources, you need to keep in mind, I'm not going to get the same RTO and RPO which is expected out of this application, right? So that's the basic fundamental principle of solution designing, right? So this is one key input you need, and you need to maintain it no matter whether you run it or not. It doesn't change the cloud strategy, which means that if your organization has decided to move to cloud, because might be the cloud is costlier now, because you are going to use something like, let's say, OpenAI. OpenAI is a costly affair because it uses a lot of heavy hardware behind the scene. That's why GitHub by Copilot, which you have seen before, is not free. Why? Because we need hardware to run those generative AI algorithms, right? And that's costly. That's not cheap. Okay, so that's why it is not free forever. So it is paid. So the moment you incorporate those modern AI into your solution, it becomes more costly, right? But if your cloud strategy says that, if you start looking at what kind of business you are running, and if you have competitor business doing the similar stuff, and if you don't incorporate those modern AI sort of approach into your solution in the cloud strategy perspective, you are actually behind the game, right? Because people are giving the best user experience by providing all those, let's say, help and support. For example, GitHub. GitHub Copilot is not new. It's a 2-year-old solution, right? It's not. OpenAI is just acquired a couple of months ago. But GitHub Copilot is not new. We are using GitHub Copilot since last 2 years. It's there in GitHub, part of the solution, right? Which means that if, let's say, if you come up with another solution like GitHub and you do not have something like Copilot, your end customer will start comparing what is extra you're giving. So it's that kind of comparison you have always faced, right? So that's why the cloud strategy has to be up to the mark and what my market is going. We don't compromise on compliance certification, which means that if you work on every domain, they have certain certification required from a hardware and infrastructure perspective. So for example, if it's healthcare, you got to go by certain rules. If it's energy, it's a different one. Retail is a different one, right? So depending on the industry you are doing this stuff, you need to provide those compliance certification specification as part of your infrastructure choices. So for example, if it's a healthcare, it's HIPAA. So if your hardware and the cloud vendor doesn't have the HIPAA compliance, you don't go for it. That's as simple as that. It's black and white. There is no if but. If it's there, no, then I cannot put my application over there. Now, if you work with European customer, GDPR is the data compliance certification you need. So if it's not there, it's not there, right? For example, I have worked with many customers. They wanted to use GitHub, but they couldn't use it because there are certain locations that GitHub data center is located, which is not within the geopolitical boundary they need to work with, right? So these are the compliance things. It's not about technology, it's about like legal things. And why we put so much emphasis on the legal things is because to protect the brand value. So if you, let's say, imagine yourself as a healthcare provider like Philips or Siemens or GE, anybody, right? If anything goes wrong, it goes wrong against that brand, right? So they have to protect the brand, and that's why it is so important. Sometimes you get into a conversation. So I worked with an Australian bank for Azure, so they were planning to move that. For 6 months, every week I used to attend 1.5-hour call only talking about legal terms, no technology. And once they decided to move, right, they are so solid in their principle and the documentation and everything, right, they cannot look back and decide on anything else. They don't act like startups, that's what I mean to say. They have to take so much caution to make sure that all their legal compliance and requirement is there. So it used to be like kind of boring, so sometimes I went back and say that I'm not going to join that call anymore because this is not something I can add value to. But and to continuously stay and listen to what they are facing challenges and look back and whether we have it and then provide those inputs they are looking for, right? So it's a kind of exercise, right? So we don't compromise on those things. What is not in scope when you try to assess that is that your human resources or the vendor resources cost. If you, let's say, hire a company to do things, that doesn't change in the cloud optimization because you need those people and resources and skill set do things, right? That's what I wanted to call it as development and deployment cost. If you look into the internal cross-charging, so many times if it is a big organization, they have a cloud center of excellence or central cloud IT team who maintains and manages your cloud infrastructure from a many different cloud vendor perspective. If it's a multi-vendor organization, you will have AWS, GCP, Microsoft, all the cloud center of excellence present, and they add additional charges on top of what the actual bill looks like, right? That doesn't change. If you hire a company who is a managed cloud provider, sort of like a company who does cloud management for you, they also add some service charges. Those things don't change, right? So you cannot reduce those costs unless you insource it, but then you have to also check how much manpower I need, what are the salary structure looks like. So that's a different thing. So that doesn't change from a cross-charging perspective. When I say cross-charging, it means that if, let's say, a business A uses cloud, they pay whatever the amount Microsoft or Google or AWS charges them, plus the service charges which is required for the internal team. That's what the cross-charging happens. Now you don't change anything which is from a network perspective. So if you're using network, right? For example, if I can give you an example of Azure, which we have something called ExpressRoute. ExpressRoute is a solution available in Azure which allows you to connect the public cloud in a private network, right? And that's a physical line which is set up explicitly for you. Between you and the ExpressRoute provider, in India it is Tata Telecom. So you basically get a fiber optic setup from this office to Tata Telecom, and then the Tata Telecom connects to Azure privately. So you're not going to use the internet. A lot of time in banking solution they use this heavily because it should not travel across the internet. And if there is a data leak happens, what will happen? So all those things are there. So those things are shared resources set up for you, so they don't change, right? You can't reduce the cost because that's decided on the organization perspective. There's ops cost also. So what happens when you deploy the application in production, the ops team comes in. You have the companies to run the operation, which means that again, if you're outsourcing those activities, there are many big organizations, they don't have non-IT companies, I mean to say. If they are not IT company, they don't focus too much on IT, they hire a company who is expert on doing those operations and then they give it to that. So those are the additional costs, right? And then we are going to suggest any architectural changes, which means because it's a different kind of conversation. So one is that you are clearly seeing something is underutilized, which means that you have switched on all the lights in all the rooms where you are not using, and you go ahead and switch off, or you change the whole layout of your building. These are the two different conversations, right? So that then architectural decision change can happen through a different, let's say V2, V3 kind of conversation you are going to make. You have a couple of tools and friends available within. I'll focus on Azure because I have got access to that so that I can show you the demo. But the fundamental principle remains same across all the public cloud, right? But I'll show you certain tools, and these are the tools which is available across many different cloud vendors also with a different name. So one of the tools is for Azure, we call it Azure Advisor. As the name suggests, it tells you many different things. One of the key things is that it tells you what is the saving opportunity for you in that subscription you're right now, right? So it will clearly give you that data. You don't have to look for many different places. If you have 100 of services, you don't have to go and fetch those information. What you get is also a Power BI dashboard built in for you, which we call as cost optimization dashboard, which you can download for free and connect. The condition is that you need to be an admin with a reader access in your billing profile. That's the only thing which is not available for everybody. But you will have certain people within your organization who can use it and then share the dashboard with you. So once it is populated, let's say I have got access to it, I can populate and I can share the dashboard with you so that you can view the data. Right? That's possible. But you cannot bring the data back to your Power BI thing, right? So it's not possible for you to bring the data because you do not have access to it. That's why I pointed out that enterprise agreement billing reader access is needed. If you do not have it, you don't get it. There is something called cost management. It is given within the Azure portal for you to analyze how your cost is moving. So you just need to play with it and understand like what are the top 5 costs. I will show you in the portal how it looks like, and then you can define a budget saying that for this resource group, I want to set a budget of monthly $100, and if it crosses, send me an alert, or if it reaches that, send me an alert. So these are all budgeting and alerting you can define. So let's say if someone goes ahead and creates a virtual machine which is a heavy GPU based virtual machine of no use, let's say just forgot about it and just created it and then it kept it. So your budget and alert will shoot up immediately as soon as you get that thing. So you know like what is going wrong here much before it actually ends up spending all 30 days and then giving you a large bill, right? So these are the things which you can define. You can always create certain other ways to prevent certain things. For example, you can say that I will only allow certain type of services in my subscription. So you can define through Azure policy. Those are different conversations you can define. It's more of a IT landing zone discussion when we set up those things. Now you have another interesting thing called cost optimization workbook in Azure. So just to give you a context of what workbook means, workbook is nothing but a reporting tool. It gives you a nice little view of your overall estate. It uses certain internal queries which we call in Azure called Custo query. So we basically query against the logs and the diagnostic and everything which gets stored, and then fetch the data using the Graph API and show you in a nice pictorial representation like how things are going on. Show you that workbook, how it looks like in the Azure portal, which you can use and monitor every now and then. You can even download those values in an Excel CSV format and then view it for your, let's say, representation. And I'll be using this data to build a presentation. And this is also an automation which we provide you for free, right, from an Azure perspective, which you can use to create a report which is understandable by the end user, right? Not everybody in your organization is interested to look into an Excel file which contains 500 virtual machines. They will say, what is the top view looks like, how much I can save, and what are the VM which can be considered, right? So that's the kind of high-level executive summary we can call it, right? And then there are certain hidden costs which we tend to ignore most of the time, right? And these are the bleeding costs I would like to call. One is the bandwidth cost. Now bandwidth is a cost which is available in all public cloud, and how it saves that from an Azure perspective. If you put something in Azure, let's say you upload a file to a virtual machine or a storage, it is free, that is ingress. When you download the file outside of Azure from an application, let's say you allow it to download, it is chargeable. And this is available between resources within Azure. So you might have, let's say, resources in North Europe, which is in UK, Ireland region, and then West Europe, which is in Amsterdam. Let's say you have the DR region set in Western Europe, primary region in North Europe. Now you constantly sync the data, which means that the data gets into the North Europe by the application and it gets passed to the West Europe. This is the egress cost because it is cross-region, right? So you have to actually also calculate the bandwidth when you calculate the cost of the Azure, right? We don't do that. I have seen many people missing out that part. And also if your application is such that it downloads a lot of data, then also it's egress because it's downloading an end user address which is not within Azure, right? It's coming out of Azure data center, it's egress. So that's sometimes a lot of cost. Networking is something which you don't see, but you are part of the networking shared cost if it is a large network available. For example, AT&T provides the IP addresses. Let's say that's the scenario. So AT&T will charge you in your organization, they will charge you back depending on how many users and IPs you are using. Storage is something which we create and forget, right? Because it's not visible unless we go ahead and use the workbook or reporting to figure it out. So that's also something which you can look at. And there are third-party integration available, which means that you are constantly reading data from internal sources like SAP or any other application or your data warehouse. Those are the solution you might be using, some industry standard market solution, which is also cost, right? So it's not part of your control, it's already set up, so you have to pay for it. These are all hidden costs. Now there are certain things which I wanted to highlight, and I will show you that how you can figure it out. That's an orphan data disk, which means that when you create a virtual machine, you say that virtual machine comes with certain disk size, but I need a bit more additional disk capacity. So you add 1 terabyte of disk with your VM. You delete the VM, but you don't delete the disk. So what happens in the Azure space, if it is a managed disk, it keeps on charging you even if it is not attached to a virtual machine, right? So you're paying for not using something, right? So what we recommend that if it is important data, you take the data backup to a backup vault or storage, and then delete the disk. And when somebody comes up and says that I need the data back, create a new disk, restore the data. So that service is also available in Azure, but many people don't do it because it's additional task for them. But at the end of the day, if it is a premium SSD 1 terabyte, it's a lot of cost. Okay, so it's a cost. Also the public IP which gets generated, if it is a public virtual machine, it will delete the VM, sometimes it doesn't delete the public IP. So we see a lot of orphan public IP. Wherever I do the assessment, I see that public IP is lying idle, nobody's using that, but it's chargeable, right? It's a small amount, but it's chargeable. So when I say small or big, right, I always refer to my customers, so they say that it's just $1.78. I don't care much. I said that think about that money going out of your pocket. Will you pay that? Why? So every cent matters, right? So it's even if it's a small one, it matters if you can clean it up. Clean as much as possible. And then there are MTR services plan, app gateways, etc. They are the key contributor to what it costs to your Azure, which absolutely of no use if you're not using them, right? So that those are things we can clearly be brutal and then clean them up. So there are certain myths when you talk to people who work on cloud, right? They tend to choose higher tier. By SKU in the cloud, it means the tier. So you say go at the basic, standard, premium. So you get the premium, assuming that you will get the best performance, right? Probably it's not the right choice because you might not be using all the time full capacity of what you are using, right? And premium comes with certain additional features, but with additional costs. So you have to be careful about what is right for you from an RTO/RP perspective, because premium does give you those SLA, service level agreement, which involves directly with RTO/RP calculation. And also, if you are going to do XYZ thing, which is only available in premium, right? Everyone is trying to reduce the cost. It is everywhere, so you have to be part of that conversation. If you're working on a cloud project, how can you save the cost? So if you bring up with the idea and something, that's what I wanted to show you here. It is definitely a value add to the team, because if you can present that this is the cost saving opportunity, everybody will give an importance to your conversation, right? So what is the business value we are getting by moving into cloud? That's the common question business asks, because for a company who produces soap, it doesn't matter whether your application is in the cloud or on premises, right? Is the soap is getting sold in market or not? It's their main concern. They're not IT company, you have to remember that. They're not as excited as we are being a cloud engineer, right? So they're excited about their product, whether it's getting a proper market or not. So for them, business value matters. So if you are not giving them additional business value, by moving into cloud, the conversation becomes difficult, right? So it is what, when you say that I want to expand it, I want to incorporate, let's say, OpenAI into your consumer-facing website to let a bot interact with your end user with X amount of additional cost, they will say, can you increase my sale by 10%? That's the business value they are looking for, right? And then the legacy licenses. If you are running some legacy workload, and those licenses will continue to be there as long as you're using them, so they are not going to change. So, now what I'm going to show you is that I'm going to cover only one part of what we call as well-architected framework. So well-architected framework is is a practice available in almost all the cloud. You will find that. But you can see that there are other things you can also do an assessment and work on. And the link which I'll be using, they have all those resources. But I'm going to focus only on the cost optimization because that will give you the benefit immediately. But you can also check how much you are ready from an operational perspective, right? It's a go live assessment, we call it. How reliable your application looks like. Do you have a proper DR setup, high availability setup? Do you need to change certain SKU to make it available, highly available? Is it, let's say, spread across multiple data centers? What if one data center goes down? Did you do those checks? So these are all performance thing. Security is important because you know security is utmost thing when a thing goes into outside of your data center boundary. So these are all kind of assessment we can do. These are all self-driven assessment. So you don't have to pay anybody to do this assessment. That's what my intent of this call is, to tell you where you can get those resources and do it. And these are all available in public forum. Okay, it's nothing internal to one organization I'm using, so it is all available. So what I'm going to use are all in front of you. So a couple of quick checklists and then I'll move to the demo. So, is your resource optimization is optimal? This can be done based on top 5 or top 10 in the billing invoice. So you look at the bill, you see the value, and you decide on what are the top contributor of my bill. And you focus and go inside that dashboard of those. For example, if it is a Kubernetes cluster, right? It's a core component. If it is a data warehouse or database, these are all core component of your application. You can go to the dashboard and see what is the utilization matrix looks like. It clearly tells you the utilization pattern. So what is the CPU percentage, RAM, etc. is being consumed. If it is consumed, let's say 10% on an average, then maybe we have done on over provisioning, right? We need to reduce the size to save the cost. We can still survive with the reduced size. That's what the resource optimization exercise is important. Auto shutting down your resources, especially for the non-prod workloads, especially in the dev and UAT. You don't need to keep them running all the time like production, for the obvious reason. If you're doing a development, it is only 9 to 6, maybe you can start at 8 o'clock, close it at 8 p.m. And that should be saving a lot of cost between the 8 p.m. to 8 p.m. time when it is not running. Right? It's a huge cost saving. Many organizations, they don't do it because they're too lazy to start things. Right? And it's not going from their pocket again. That's also a mentality I've seen. There are certain ways to incorporate savings into your Azure specific thing. It is called saving plan. So there are saving plan, reservation, and Azure hybrid benefit, which I will cover now. I'll explain what is Azure hybrid benefit first. If you buy a Windows license, now many big organizations, they buy Microsoft Windows license, Windows or SQL licenses in bulk. We call it a software assurance. It's a 3-year contract between Microsoft and your company where you buy certain number of licenses already. So for example, you buy 100,000 Windows Server license for your organization for 3 years. So in 3 years, any Windows upgrade happen, you get this upgraded license for free, and it is called software assurance. If you're part of the software assurance, you can use the license both on premises as well as in the cloud. That's called Azure hybrid benefit. Benefit is that if you compare a virtual machine with Windows and with Linux, you'll clearly find a pricing difference. And that difference is the Windows hourly license cost. So Windows will be more than the Linux because Windows adds hourly license cost. If you use Azure hybrid benefit, that becomes your Linux VM cost. So that's a straight away saving, right? So Azure hybrid benefit is a very popular one for the large organization who has got software assurance. They use both SQL and Windows in Azure, and you can use the same license over there if they're not using it on premises, and then save the straight away cost. Azure reservation is something like for certain resources, like if you're running a domain controller, if you're running a database, you're not going to shut down those things in production. They can be reserved, which means that you know that it is going to work for 24/7 as long as this application is available, right? So you can say that I want to commit for this resource for 3 years. And then when you commit, from $100 it becomes $60. So you're going to pay that same virtual machine $60 a month. It's just a billing calculation instead of $100. So it's a straight away saving if you do reservation. And reservation can be done on platform as a service like Cosmos DB, SQL, database, PaaS, and other things, plus the virtual machines which are infrastructure, right? So you will find the list of resources you can reserve based on the pattern and usage. You don't do reservation for dev resources or UAT resources which are not long running or in production, but you do reservation for production resources. Savings plan is another new thing which I'll show you in the pricing calculator. But let me go quickly. You just need to decide whether you need to create an over-provisioned resource or create an auto-scaling capability. Whether you should select a PaaS over IaaS, that's also a savings opportunity. PaaS is always cheaper than IaaS most of the time. And then how can you optimize the data transfer if you're creating resources in multiple regions? Can you combine them into a single region and then the data transfer becomes almost zero, right? So that's the thing. So let me quickly go into the demo and show you a couple of areas. Alright. So first of all, I'll walk you through a portal which is what we call as Azure well-architected framework assessment. So I'll say so I just wanted to show you that it's not just Microsoft but also AWS, Google has that. So I just type AWS, so you will find the well-architected. So it's a common terminology, right? So it's what you see here applies to other things. You just need to read how they do it. But if you say for Azure, you also find one well-architected framework. So that basically is a landing page for everything you do in well-architected. So if you look into this website, right, it is documents like what are the different pillars you can do, and cost is one. You can go and read them. But I'll let you read and find how you can improve your cost. But let me show you a couple of things. Now, well-architected framework comes with an assessment, right? So let me type that assessment. So why I'm using this search is just to let you know that you can also search and get instead of I sharing the link, because this can keep changing, right? So now you can see that there are a couple of things which you get, right? And one of the link I'm going to click is that assessment. Now this is an interview-based exercise, which means that one is going into your data and looking how the data is behaving, and another is why you have taken certain architectural decision based on which we take certain calls. So you can, if you click on Start Assessment, it will basically populate the assessment, and then it will ask you to choose which. Yeah, so it will ask you to give a name, so that it will be like that. I'm not going to link my subscription, that's fine. But if you just say that, if you link the subscription, then whatever recommendation you get in subscription also comes back as part of the CSV output which you get, right? So that's also a good thing, so you should be doing that. But then if you see that there are multiple different assessment can be done. So one is core architecture, well-architected review. So if you do that and if you hit next, it gives you all the pillars against which you can do that. So you can see that I have got all the pillars. So I'll choose cost optimization for the time being, but you can do that exercise for other things also. So you can do it, all of them together also. So if you want to do it together. Now you can see that it comes with set of some 10 plus questions, but if you look into that, this clearly is a clear yes no kind of answer. It's not going to ask you to write something with an explanation. It's not expected. Whether you do it or not, yes or no, right? So it also explains you below, and this is a long-term assessment we need to do. So I have done a couple of assessments with big customers where things are going out of their hand, and then we had to spend, let's say, multi-day to get those answers. Even if it is, let's say, 10 plus sections, but really to go through the whole thing, you need to bring in the right kind of people into that conversation. You cannot just like have one person answering all the questions. You might need a DevOps, an architect, a product owner, or somebody from the FinOps, all of them into the room to let's answer that. So it's a multi-day exercise, right? So you can see that there are a couple of things. Is the price model for workload is clear, but it tells you like a bit of things. So it's a conversation. So you have to actually, even if you are yes, no, but you have to agree in a room together let's say I will mark it as check. You can leave it unchecked also, but you can mark it as check. So that's how you do the assessment. So once you do the assessment, what you get, I'll show you the output. At the end of the thing, so let me just go back. And this is available to you also. So I'll click next, 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 and it gives you an option to download it as a CSV file. So it stays with you if you log in. So it is, as it is multi-day activity, you can log in and it saves the progress and stays with you. Next day you come back, log in, you see the same assessment, you can start from where you have left. So it is helpful in that sense. You can add additional notes also. So for example, certain things, let's say if it is a SAP needs a certain VM size. There is no compromise on that. So we can mention that because it's a SAP workload, we need this VM size even if it's underutilized, right? We cannot reduce the size. So we'll go ahead with that and then I'll just click 3 more times and then it should be done. But you get the idea, right? You can even choose none of the above. If they are not relevant to you, you can just ignore all of them and move on, right? And then if you just go ahead and say the last one, I end here. I didn't click any one of them, so it will not produce a nice looking CSV, which is not. But you see that it also tells you like whether you are doing good, bad or moderate, right? So it's like that kind of graph is showing up here and you can export it to CSV, which means the data comes to you in raw format. Now what do you do with that CSV? That's what my demo is. So once you get that CSV, you get certain tools available in GitHub public. So in GitHub, if you go and search well-architected framework tools and you type GitHub also, that helps reduce this search. And you can see that it gives you this first thing, well-architected framework tools. Okay, that's the repository which I'm going to use. And that repository contains set of PowerShell scripts, set of PowerPoint slides, some sample CSV. I have not modified any one of them, just to let you know like how it works. And one of the folders which I'm going to do is that well-architected review presentation. So this folder has got a README file. So anytime you go to GitHub, right, README is important file. So you go to README, it gives you step-by-step instruction what you can do and cannot do, right? So it tells you what you need, and then it also gives you the command prompt by which you can download the whole content of this folder, right? So if you open a command prompt, copy this line and run it, it will download it in your local folder. So that's what I did already, just to save time. And then if you go a little down, it shows you like how the prompt looks like when it downloads. So it's nothing you need to do, just an example output. But for the reporting purpose, now you have the CSV. You need to build some, let's say, presentable report to your CTO who doesn't understand the nitty-gritty of Azure or AWS or GCP, right? So how do you produce that? We have a PowerShell script given to you to produce the report, and I'll show you that how it looks like. So if I go back to my folder where I have downloaded, right? So you can see that's the same folder I have downloaded, and I just increase the font size maybe. Can you see that? So these are the PowerPoint templates you get, right? These are not the actual PowerPoint. Now by using the generate assessment report.ps1, that's a PowerShell, it only criteria is that it needs PowerShell 7 plus. If you are running it in PowerShell 5, it won't work because it has a Windows file selector prompt which is not supported in the previous PowerShell. That's it, okay? But let's say if you have PowerShell 7, which is available in, by the way, Linux as well, because it's a core, so you can run it in. So I'll say PowerShell 7, I'll run that. And I go to that folder, okay? So I'll say d:/. So you get this generate assessment report.ps1. Okay, so if I just run this generate assessment PS1, it will ask me what is the CSV file. So you can pick the CSV file from the location you have downloaded. So that's the dialog box which is not supported in previous version of Azure. So you will say, well, architected review sample. It comes from the GitHub. So I didn't do anything in this sample, but you can get the sample from your actual assessment and then point it to that, right? So it has got certain input. That's why it helps me build some meaningful slide, right? So if you look into that, it does its own work. And after doing everything, it will generate a PowerPoint slide with the date and time, and you will find that it's available in the same folder. So once it is done, you will see that there is no error. It will create a file. So I created yesterday a file just in case it fails. You never know, right? So that's why, right? So it's created. Now you'll find a file. So there you can see that there is a file called 0901, that is yesterday's file, and this is the file which is 0902 1251, exactly this time, right? My local time in the machine. So if I open this slide, and this is the generated slide from the template and the data you provided, right? So what you get is an executive summary which you can in fact present and modify. You can also modify, right? It's modifiable. And it also talks about some basic things. It doesn't come, it's a part of the template. But from white onwards, these are all generated ones. So you can see that the date is given, right? And then it gives you the executive summary, which says what are the high level things you see in this assessment. So the assessment file which I have used that did the assessment in all 5 pillars. So you'll find sections, but if you do it only for cost, you will find only for cost or reliability depending on that. And it has also some recommendations because your score is really poor in those areas. So you can see that it's going into the red area. That's why it is giving you certain best practices with a documentation link, which means you can go and see, read, understand what exactly you need to do to make it better, right? So it's like that. So it's basically not only telling you to do it, but also telling you how to do it, right? So if you have to do, because these are all actionable things. Now when I come to these actionable things, I was telling to someone before this conversation, is that we can do n number of assessment. It's like going into an executive health check, right? And doing nothing what doctor says us to do, right? So it's like that. So if you are not going to take any action, it makes no sense for you to build up this report. It is with a mentality that I'm going to make changes based on this assessment, and then I want to improve either cost or performance or security, whatever that pillar will be, right? So it is that one. So this will help you take the action. But our second demo, which I'm going to show you, how you can incorporate that as part of your backlog, all the assessment which is coming up. So that's what I'm going to share later. But let me just quickly go through the slide and then quickly show you that you have the application performance, in security, so I'll go quickly on the cost. Yeah, so this is the cost section. And then it says that you can see that health modeling and monitoring and deployment testing are basically you need to raise the score, which means you need to do a little better, right? Probably in the assessment you might have selected that I have no monitoring available. I do not have dashboard or budgeting alert created for my cost. So that's what you probably have selected in the assessment. That's why it is telling. So this is not looking at your data, but based on the conversation on the interview assessment we did, right? And then you have that recommendations how you can incorporate that, and cost was very little, but you can actually go a bit deeper. Now I want to quickly show you Azure portal and what all you get from a cost perspective. So let me go to my Azure. So I kind of managed to get a dummy Azure portal access which has got an enterprise agreement access. Otherwise I do not have an enterprise agreement access. And I have this. Now one of the things is that I said that you have a cost management service available which gives you all sort of things, right? If you go into Azure portal and open the cost and thing, you will see that you can build up the alert, budget and all those things, right? You can even do a cost analysis and it will tell you like what are the top scoring resources or top spend you have, right? You can see various different reports and etc., right? So these are all at your disposal without you configuring anything. You just need to use it. Now, one of the things I was talking about, the advisor, right? So if I say advisor, this is constantly monitoring all the 5 pillars of well architected and gives you a dashboard. Now you can see that cost, security, reliability at the bottom, right, all these boxes. These has got certain, let's say, notification. If I go into the cost, it tells me like where I have an opportunity to save the cost. Now you can see that
It says the consider SQL past DB reserved instance to save over pay as you go. So whatever you have created, you will reserve it. So go for reservation. That's what it's telling, right? And it's also pointing which resource. It's not like a high level statement. It's also telling you what are the resources you need to do. But this is like a web interface. You can download it as a CSV also. So you can download it. And if you are an Excel master, you can do pivoting and then you can build up your own report and all these things, right? So you get a CSV also from Azure Advisor. Overall, taking the whole picture of your one subscription or multiple subscription. It is taking multiple subscription because I have access to multiple subscription. But if you're pointing to one subscription, it will get the data for that. So this data is with you. So when you need to do the assessment, you need to remember that your workload should be old enough to capture that data, which means that at least 60 days old. If it is not that old, the data is not present. So if you have deployed just yesterday, today, the advisor will not recommend you anything. So it needs to have the data. So it's all based on the usage pattern, right? You can get that data. Now one of the things I wanted to quickly show you is the workbook. So if you say monitor, so this is called Azure Monitor. Now Azure Monitor does give you the workbook. So workbook is a JSON based template but with a custom query language inside, which helps you create a report within Azure portal to see. So you can create once and then you come back and refresh it, it shows you the latest data. So you don't have to create something external. Now if you go to the workbook, it gives you certain workbook, and there are many workbook available from Microsoft and third party in GitHub. You can bring them in and create a new workbook. So creating a new workbook is very simple. So you say create new and you say that I want to edit. You just copy the content from that workbook and paste it here. That's how you create the workbook. You don't write 1000 lines of code in JSON, right? Or in this format, right? So if the workbook you can modify and you can add it here, but there are certain workbook given to you and hopefully it will increase over a period of time. So if I go back and then come to monitor again, and I go to workbook, and I see that there is do you see any cost saving workbook? Okay, so I do not see it here for any reason, but let me show you something else. So let me say that Azure resource location. This is a workbook available. If I just add this workbook to my thing, it gives me a picture like this. This is coming from Push to Query language. So if you're aware of the Push to Query language, you can actually build the map and all these things itself in the query and put it like plot it in map. It shows you like this. So it's like a visualization. So many of you have used Python, right? The Scala and all these things, right? You created all those things. It's the same thing. So you get that. Here I have got resource locations available across the globe. So you can even see the resource view. Some different workload will show you different value. But let me add a workbook for you and then show you that over here. So if I go on monitor and let me show a quick demo. Let me pick up a workbook from here. So I copy the whole content of the workbook. These are the workbook you usually get generally in the public, or you can also build by yourself. So I say I want to add this workbook. I save it and I apply, and I'm saying done editing. And I just created this create this workbook in my subscription. Now you can see that my resources are spread across the globe. Not only that, there are multiple tabs I'll walk you through. But you can actually filter the subscription you want to assess. So it shows you all the subscription. You can just select one single subscription if you're interested in only one subscription. So there are filter options available. This is part of the workbook structure. You have tagged resources, untagged resources, right? So how many resource you have in this subscription, there are 644 resources you're using, and then you can see that there are Azure Advisor recommendations coming up and all these things. If you go a little up, you will find that I've got a compute which talks about mainly the virtual machines and all these things. Now I will show you a little icon which could be an important one. You can see that I have got few VM. Now imagine that list is quite big. So you have a small down arrow in the workbook which helps you download it in Excel, CSV rather. So it downloads in CSV and you can just use that data for your further analysis if you want to do further analysis, right? So you can see all these tabs in the various different workbooks depending on which workbook you are using. So Azure Hybrid Benefit, as I said, like it can identify what are the resources which doesn't have a hybrid benefit applied, right? And then it can show you that. Right now it doesn't show anything. Even the Linux also has a hybrid benefit. If you have gone with the RHEL licenses, you can use that license in the cloud also depending on what the license model you are using, right? Now coming to the cost information, hopefully it will not show any relevant information because I do not have access to the billing, but let me try that, okay? So let me give the filter to this, and if you notice here, it will not only tell me what are the unattached managed disk I have, but also the corresponding cost associated to it. So when you have that conversation, right, if you have that number, right, by deleting this 5 managed disk, you're going to save X amount of value. So it's more meaningful and immediate, right? So you can see that it also gives you that, but the only thing is that you need to have the billing access. So if we go a little down the line, you'll find all the information, but you can download the file and you'll find a column with a JSON input which talks about the cost, the currency, the monthly cost and yearly cost available. So if you download this CSV file, so you'll find that. So right now I do not have any idle application gateway and all these things. So you can see that I have got many IP addresses, public IP addresses, which are not attached to any virtual machine, which is what causing me a little bit of cost, which is of no use in my organization. So I can actually clean them up, take a call when you really need them and clean them up. In my opinion, you should go ahead and delete what you don't need. Why to pay for something which you are not using, right? And then there are... Sorry?
These are hourly cost or?
These are hourly cost. Yeah. So the cost which you see here is a monthly cost.
Monthly cost.
So but the meter is hourly for this resource.
Can you take a question right now?
Yeah, please.
So, sir, you are speaking about so many unattached public IP address cost or unattached disk cost, but can't we just have a simple pre-created rule that whenever something is unattached, we just automatically delete it?
Yeah, that automation can be done. Yes. Many organization does that.
Especially in the era of infrastructure as a code, we can have predefined rules every time, even to take a backup of the disk, like you were speaking about earlier. All this can be automated, isn't it?
Yes, it can be automated.
So I don't need to remember everything, or even look at this kind of data.
No, that's the ideal scenario. But what if you have missed assessing something, then it will tell you where you can automate. It's an opportunity for you to automate if you haven't done it already. But if you haven't done it already, you will find many times I'm doing assessment and that doesn't give me any cost saving, right? So I put a disclaimer saying that there is no guarantee that I will be able to save your cost, because I know if you are mature in the cloud journey, you probably have taken all the right things, decided all the right things, right?
So, and the next thing is, I don't come from the infrastructure field, but what I anticipate is for very large organizations, there is so much data, right? Like trends on what time, what hardware is being used more. And I believe that sometimes some hardware resources also need to be warmed up in anticipation of upcoming use. So for those kind of scenarios, I see some scope for use of machine learning so that based on previous data, it is taking action in advance.
Yeah. So the Azure Advisor does use certain level of algorithm, especially to tell you you might need to scale up the virtual machine. I have seen those recommendations coming up based on the virtual machine usage pattern.
Right.
So let's say if it is getting used 90% over a period of time for a very long period of time. So Advisor will tell you consider increasing the size of the virtual machine, even if it is still okay, right? So it will tell you because it has seen your 60-day data or something like that and analyze the thing.
Is this auto alert can be done?
Huh?
So we can do auto alert for this.
Yeah, alert can be configured. You can configure an alert when a VM threshold reaches certain limit.
For advisor.
Yeah, advisor has an alert capability. Yeah, but you have to decide like based on what criteria you are going to create an alert. So is it a virtual machine reaching 90% utilization? Is it a SQL data reaching its maximum capacity, right?
No, I understand what you're saying, that if it is reach certain percentage, it will get alerted. So my concern is like, my question is like, now you mentioned advisor is going to recommend, we have to scale up these machines. Is those kind of scale up for advisor, those can be alerted?
Yeah, so that is not part of the advisor directly, it's part of Azure Monitor.
That's part of the Azure Monitor.
Yeah, so you can actually create alert from a monitor data. Because Azure Advisor uses the Azure Monitor data. So it is a single source of truth. At the end of the day, you get different abstraction for a different purpose. Azure Advisor is a well-architected framework-based assessment based on your data. Azure Monitor is monitoring all the resources you are using within Azure. So it has got everything you can access, and you can build your alert from Monitor saying that if my cluster is being utilized for almost 90%, can you notify me? Then I will take a call whether to increase it or not. That's the alert you are going to set. Yeah.
But recommendation alert, that alert, so based on monitoring we can do that.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned, advisor is going to recommend, so these are the constraints utilized resources. So you in future you may require this much resource increase, or you can do the auto scale. So those alerts can be do or not.
Yes, you can do that.
Through what? Advisor or through monitor?
Advisor does give you this recommendation. So Azure Monitor doesn't give you recommendation. So Advisor is like an abstraction on top of your Azure Monitor data to give you a meaningful insight. Otherwise, everything is stored in Monitor. If you do a very low level, let's say VM is not responding, and you create an alert because the VM should be up and running all the time, that is what you get in the Azure Monitor. Right?
Can I map it with an APM tool, right? Can I map all of this data with an APM?
Yes, you can. So in fact, if you are using any solution which basically captures the log, you can push the log to that. So we store it, all the Azure log, we store it in Azure Log Analytics. That's a storage, which is a NoSQL storage, but a semi-structured. So it is not like any random data. So you have got a schema, table defined, and you store the data. You can push the data to your SIM solution also. You can push the data to your application monitoring tool also if you're using that. And they do have connector also. There are standard connectors available which can read the Azure Log Analytics and pull the data. There are also, you don't have to do anything extra. So these way you can push the data also there and have a dashboard view which is quite standard, because you might not be using only one cloud, right? You might be having cloud on premises and many different things. You are probably having a single dashboard view for all the estate, right? So in that case you need to push the data, and the connectors are available to read from, not only from Azure but also from AWS Google you can read.
Do you use Grafana to make?
Yes, yeah. So how are we doing? So how are we time-wise? 2 to 3 minutes. Two more questions.
It's how many lines of code are there on the JSON file?
Let me tell you. So I'll start with you for asking question.
You should have started with the first question.
Oh yeah, sure, why not? It's not my chocolate anyways. Happy to share. So let me check quickly. So it's a 1200 line font. Sorry, no. It should be more. Very good. Little more than 14,000 lines.
I was wondering how you dynamically generate the small JSON.
No, it's not dynamic. It's a lot of contribution for a lot of people. It's not a one person's job, right? So as I said, like you see the sections in the tab, right? Each section writes a custom query to get the data from your log and populates that in the workbook. So you can keep growing the workbook and make a tab view also. Right? You start small and then you go. You can even modify this also. So it's like you're getting some platform and then you start modifying on that platform. Right? So it's like that.
I have one question. Like whoever want to explore, like personally we wanted to have some instance in cloud, public cloud. So in DigitalOcean or like Vultr, we have a fixed plan like $5 you get this machine.
Yeah.
So that is quite. I feel like Slave will not get into a trap or something like where we don't get a dynamic billing. So do we have anything in the public cloud like AWS or in Azure or?
Yeah. So you can create a billing restriction on your subscription, which will tell you, like for example, the subscription which I use for my internal thing has a billing limit defined, which means that if I reach that limit, everything is kind of read-only for me.
It will not stop, is it? I mean, the instance will not stop, is it?
It will stop because
Yeah,
the instance will run means you have to pay.
But there is as I called out the DigitalOcean or Vultr, there they are giving let's say $10 if you pay fixed amount. Then you can you are going to pay only $10 per monthly. So if your utilization is something beyond that machine limit, then I think it might crash or something. But we don't get any excess amount in the billing. So I feel like it is a bit safer to go to that kind of a vendor than public cloud who are offering with a larger product. So I'm just expecting if something can be provided by these vendors also. So I can obviously as you provide a lot of security and a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
Than other vendors. So it will be safe to use Azure. So in that case, but only one fear is that sometimes if you are not having the enough knowledge in the beginning, so you might get excess billing. So I'm just asking, do we have any like a basic product or something where I can pay fixed amount of money for the configuration that I'm getting or the virtual machine that I'm getting? Do you have something like that?
In Azure, no. Because if you look into Azure, today we have I think 170 services in Azure, right? So it is not just VM, it is more than VM. So, and then it is being used by enterprises, not by individuals. So that is why you see because enterprises has a lot of money.
Yeah.
They can spend extra million, but we cannot spend extra $100. So, but it's meant for those big fishes, maybe. So that is why you don't see those end user, individual requirement perspective, but you can define in your subscription, which I do for my MSDN subscription. I do define that what is the maximum I should be hitting, and I keep a buffer. Let's say I get $150 every month to use it, so I put up 120 as my alert, and the moment I see that alert coming to my mail and SMS, I go and delete certain resources which I probably have kept it open without any reason, right? So those are the things you can take a decision before it hits that threshold. So that way you basically can stay within the boundary without going, because see, I use that for my demo purpose and for my testing purpose. If it goes in read only at the beginning of the month, then whole month I'm not going to use it, right? I will not be able to use it. Maybe I set up the whole thing over there, so I need that. So I either should be snoozing them, stopping them, and then so the bill gets paused, or I should be using some lower end things or delete some unnecessary resources. For example, if I create a big data resource, then it will be consuming everything in a few hours, right? So it's like that. So it's depending on what resource you are creating for personal things. Yeah.
And if we are doing any cross-platform stuff, have you come across any platform which can generate a well-architected framework, entire maybe the same kind of a thing for cross-platform, if you have more than one stuff?
Yeah, so what you have seen is cost optimization, cost analysis, right? Cost management. It's a tool called clouding. Like GitHub, Microsoft also acquired clouding. So it's a third-party tool capable of doing the thing not only for Azure but also GCP and AWS. So if you use cost management tool in Azure, it can also pull out information from your AWS and GCP and show you a single dashboard. So there are many such third-party tools available. Yeah, which does give you a very nice. You can even give you a prediction. So if you're running a project, right, looking at your growth rate, it can tell you that in the next 3 months you are going to grow this much. big. If you are continuously growing, then you will assume that your growth will be similar. Maybe you have fixed your production and you are done with it. So that's the kind of prediction you get. So it helps you do the budget. So budgeting help. Future cost.
This does actually integrate with GCP and
Yes, you can connect to GCP.
Yeah.
But the only thing is that you need agent. Because the data will come from there, right?
Yeah.
So you need agent there to pull that in because it cannot connect to GCP or Azure without your permission.
How much granularity do we get for Kubernetes clusters?
So I'll just pass it on.
Wriju, one last question and then we can
Yeah.
connect after lunch. Network, ask you questions.
So how much granularity do we get for Kubernetes clusters? Do we get the pods? So Rust are built on top of Azure itself, right?
Ah,
But for EKS, inside EKS, all those pods and everything is there, right?
yeah.
So cluster itself.
Cluster. So whatever infrastructure you have created, that nodes, that virtual machines,
Yeah.
which is basically helping you to put those pods inside the VM. That is what we can tell you. Because we don't say anything specific to your application. Think of it like you deploy an application. Our assessment doesn't talk about your application performance. Then it's the application insights job. So it's a different app dynamics sort of tool which tells you application performance. Right? Where your application is slow, fast, not working good, and giving error. But the infrastructure cost is the Azure cost.
So which do you consider? A cluster inside EKS or outside in the where Azure has a service itself?
So the Azure gives you something called Azure Kubernetes Services,
Yeah.
which is a managed Kubernetes services available in Azure but based on virtual machines. So at the end of the day, when you get the bill for virtual machine network and storage.
You won't get too much. Can't we? So if I talk about AWS,
You get, if you see the dashboard of the Kubernetes cluster, it will tell you what is the utilization looks like for the cluster. If you have less pod but more capacity, then it will tell you that you're probably 10% only. So then you can delete some of the nodes and reduce the size to 2 nodes cluster. Instead of 20 nodes, you can make 2 nodes. So that's what the information you get because based on the usage pattern. But what application you are running inside the pod, within the container, right? That information is not visible to us unless you use some app dynamics or app insight sort of tool, which extract that log and push it into Azure and give you a different dashboard. But it can if you configure.
Is Azure as robust for IaaS compared to AWS? As AWS market share is almost double of.
Because they started early. So Microsoft started with platform as a service back in 2009. When it was announced in Build Conference, we used to call it PDC conference. Before that it was known as Red Dot and it was all platform as a service. So by that time AWS came, they came with infrastructure as a service. So they started early. That's why you see more people using more AWS because they have been using for so long, right? So but the thing is that if you compare different cloud vendor, right? From a feature perspective, you will find more or less it's same across because everybody is trying to catch up with everyone, right? That's the game here, right? And it's also the pricing. So you'll find AWS is reducing the price. Next day you'll find Google is also reducing the price. So that will be there, right?
That's why they make like that. That's very confusion. So sometimes AWS gives some offers. Sometimes GCP will come. There will be some offers. Why this means based on what they will decide is like this.
Can we connect with Wriju during lunch for a question? Because we are running out.
Yeah. So it's important that we have the lunch, otherwise.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks Wriju for sharing this information.